Pushkin. Welcome back to Risky Business, a show about making better decisions. I'm Maria Konnikova.
And live on tape from the beautiful Pushkin Studios in the Flatiron District of New York City, New York, I'm Nate Silver.
Yes, this is correct. This is the first time that Nate and I are both in the studio, in the same place, since the pilot of the show, Nate.
But if you detect an extra special chemistry, it's very close quarters here, actually.
It is.
Yeah.
And today we've got some stories for you. First up, the Failing Atlantic Monthly.
Failing Atlantic Monthly
has quite the scoop. So we're going to be talking about Jeffrey Goldberg's Signal, information security, and what not to do on your group chat.
Then we'll catch up on our NCAA brackets, recap, for example, how Team Nate is so far in the lead against Team Maria and Monty. And we'll talk about women's basketball and why on earth are women not allowed to join the WNBA until 22 years old.
Let's get into it, Nate. But before we do, you moved. You are now in a new apartment.
I moved from a neighborhood which might generously be called Chelsea, but really is South Penn Station to
Thank you, Nate.
East
You
Village.
Finally, now that you moved, finally admitted it.
On the New York Times map, it was considered 70% Chelsea.
All right.
Chelsea Midtown West hybrid.
But now that you're out of there, you can acknowledge that it really was not Chelsea.
No, and there is something about being in an actual neighborhood.
Yeah.
Right? South Penn,
yep.
Northeast Chelsea, as I call it, serves kind of this transient community, right? It's people commuting in and out of the city. There are some working spaces there, right? People going to Knicks and Rangers games. I like Knicks and Rangers, right? But Madison Square Garden dominates in some ways the profile of the neighborhood. And so, yeah, this is a real neighborhood. And I'm reading the Ezra Klein book. There's an abundance, right? Not only do you have your independent coffee shops in the morning, right? You have your French Vietnamese independent coffee shop and your Scandinavian independent coffee shop, right? You have your vaguely Russian, Eastern European, mostly vegetarian wine bar. It's and they're all pretty fucking good, right?
I'm glad you're now in your new neighborhood. I'm glad you're finally moved because, as we all know, moving sucks. The process, that is. So I'm glad that's behind you. Let's talk about something a little bit less fun. I mean, on some level, it's kind of hilarious, which is that this week there was a absolute bombshell. Bombshell is usually overused, but I feel like this was a bombshell piece in The Atlantic. Unprecedented, as far as I can tell, in the annals of national security, where Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, was inadvertently included on a Signal chat with top members of U.S. national security that were discussing a then imminent attack on the Houthis. Let's start off by just talking about InfoSec, or information security, and how the fuck something like this happens.
Well, no, I am a top information security is my top issue, right? The reason I voted for Donald Trump in 2016 is because of Hillary Clinton's email server. I thought that was the most important story in the country. I thought there was too little press coverage of it, if anything. Sorry. I vote for Trump.
Yes, for anyone who thought that Nate was serious, Nate did not vote for Trump in 2016. He was being sarcastic.
Are you a group chat person?
I am only in a few group chats, and those group chats are 3 people. That I'm in a group chat with you and your partner.
Yeah.
And I'm in a similar group chat with, my college roommates and a few others, but I hate group chats.
Yeah,
they're awful.
I'm not a big, I think it's probably because, now this is where I sound like a fucking snob, right? But Maria, you and I we're kind of we're able to communicate. We kind of communicate professionally for a living, right? And so I could see the value of a group chat if you want this cool group of people that you're who care about your opinions, right? But like if you're writing all the time, I'm like this with emails too. Like I don't want to fucking write a long email.
No.
I'll make it a fucking newsletter.
Yeah.
Monetize that shit. Talk about it in the podcast. Monetize that shit. I'm not giving free stuff away in group chats. Sorry.
No, that's absolutely true. So I've had to set up group chats a few times for various reasons. And whenever I do, I'm actually super paranoid about putting the wrong person in the group chat. So Nate, for instance, let me use you as an example because I've had to add you to group chats for scheduling purposes. And I have several Nates in my phone, and you are never the first Nate to come up, probably because you don't have an iPhone. So my iPhone doesn't like that and always is like, no, don't use this Nate. And so, Barstool Nate, he is also in my phone.
Oh, wow.
And he is the one who is always coming up before you. And I am always paranoid. Sorry, Barstool Nate, but I'm always paranoid that I'm going to add the wrong Nate to one of these things. And I triple check to make sure that, I don't inadvertently say, add, and I'm adding the wrong person. Now, I'm only highlighting this to say, okay, when you're starting a group chat, and this is just about scheduling, you probably care about who's in it. Now imagine you're doing a group chat about bombing a country, right? Or bombing a group. Shouldn't you double check, triple check, quadruple check? I mean, okay, wait, what am I even talking about? Why are we starting a group chat about national security? Rule number 1, and you probably have learned this as a journalist, you never put anything in an email or in a chat that you don't want on the front page of the New York Times, potentially. Because
oh, no, and that's the other reason why I don't, I'm pretty circumspect about what to say over email or even, even private event. I'm just careful about what I say. Whereas I'm kind of I say lots of shit like on the podcast and on Twitter and whatever else in the newsletter. But I don't assume that things stay private without like a explicit understanding.
You can't assume they stay private, and you can't assume that things don't get passed along, that basically the only people who see them are going to be the people who you are sending them to. So nothing should be done over chat that is sensitive. That's not how you communicate national security. That's not how you communicate war plans. But in this case, that is what happened. Now, one of the things I learned when I was back when I was working on the confidence game, I actually talked to a lot of people who do information security, who do cybersecurity, because hacking and that kind of social engineering is huge for con artists. And they all told me, I don't care what kind of a security system you have. I don't care how up to date you are, who does your InfoSec, all of this stuff. You're only as strong as your weakest human link. And it's always going to be human. It's never going to be technological, right? There's always going to be that dumb person. And if I can get to that dumb person, then I can take you down, right? I can get behind any firewall. I can get past anything. And that's just like 101 ABC. And this is like the textbook case of, wait, I didn't even need to do anything. Right? You just fucked up so badly that, you just here is the weakest link, and the weakest link happens to be at the top of our national intelligence.
So one thing I'd say is you are bringing a lot of people that don't have a lot of experience in government, right? I listened to the Ezra Klein podcast with, I think it was Ben Buchanan, who was like basically one of Biden's heads of AI policy, and he was like, yeah, you go into the government and like there are rooms where you're not allowed to use the internet, and there are all these protocols that are quite cumbersome. And if you come from the private sector, I'm sure it's like extremely annoying, right? And so the fact that like, J.D. Vance, only 2 years in government, right? Pete Hegseth, no years in government unless I'm forgetting about something, right? You bring in people that are kind
Does
of
Fox and Friends count?
I think, it could be state-owned media. I don't know. But yeah, you bring in people who are just like, hey, we're kind of treating this like a group chat, like we're negotiating some VC deal or whatever. And like on the one hand, it's kind of like, how do I put this? The casualness of the language. I don't think any of them come off especially badly in the text that are referenced. I mean, if anything, they're kind of like, they seem like, there are internal politics. Like Stephen Miller comes in, he's the kind of Trump advisor, and he's like, don't go too far in interpreting Trump's shit, right? And then they kind of shut up, right? But look, I'm sure J.D. Vance is a smart guy, right? I think he might be in over his depth. I think he's like a smart guy, and it's kind of fun to watch them chit-chatting. But why is this journalist why is this journalist copied on this chain?
Yeah, and no one catches that he's on the chain at any point. And apparently, so we don't know, but apparently there are very sensitive details shared. And at this point, so just in terms of journalistic ethics, people are joking and saying, you're a journalist, why didn't you stay in the chat? Well, it's because Jeffrey Goldberg actually understands the repercussions of this. And at the moment that this was actually said that this is correct, right? That this isn't, because at first he didn't know if this was a spoof or like what this was, right? But once it was confirmed that this is legit, he left. And I think that is the ethical thing to do. Although there's obviously a part of me that is like, oh, but what else could you have learned? But I think that is the ethical and the legally safer thing to do, because people will try, I think, to come after him. And it was smart to leave.
I think you can debate. I mean, look, fundamentally, okay, well, let's ask you, let's say that you're added to this group chat. What do you do?
Well, I think at first, especially given, my background and the books that I've written, the book I'm working on, I would assume that it's fake. I mean, that would be my initial assumption. How could you not assume that it's fake when you see the names?
That it was fake until he kind of performed this out of sample test where he I guess he said he drove to, they make a movie about it, right? Deep throat. He drives to some suburban grocery store and waits in a parking lot and is like, well, if they announce in the next 15 minutes that we're bombing Yemen, right?
Then this is real.
Then this is real. And yeah. And the Trump people kind of caught off guard, did acknowledge that this was a real chat, right? Whether heads will roll because of this, I don't know. Probably depends on who Trump's mad at.
Yeah, I doubt heads will roll. And I think that probably the two heads that might roll are the head of the person who acknowledged that it was real immediately and Goldberg, right? Like they're going to try to find a way to pin this on him instead, because that is their, initially, when Pete Hegseth was asked about this, he said, oh, it's fake. This isn't real, right? But the government had already acknowledged that it was very much real.
Have you ever gotten a scoop just by kind of being in the right place at the right time?
Yeah. I have, especially because I'm female, and so people tend to forget that I exist as an actual person with a brain. No, it's true. It's true. I blend into the background, and people forget to take me into account. I'm assuming with you, it's probably less likely that people forget.
It's always interesting, like kind of what people, and then it probably is different if you're male and white, whatever, mistakenly taken for heterosexual in my case, but like what people feel comfortable sharing with you. I mean, this is true even at the poker table in both public games and private games. In poker, there is kind of, I think, a pretty strong unspoken understanding that like, if someone relates something to me at the poker table, then if I don't have a relationship with them, right, I would kind of anonymize it, right? Yeah. But people do have a lot of trust, right? I mean, I've heard people discussing wildly illegal things at the poker table.
Oh, for sure. They do have a lot of trust, and they do often forget that you're a journalist, and you do have to remind them. But yeah, I think it's very interesting that not only Hegseth, but like the Trump reaction to this was, what's the Atlantic, failing magazine, right? Nobody cares about this.
I'm sure it's got a million plus page,
And so if you think about what is ideal risk mitigation strategy, right? Like, okay, you fuck up. What do you do now, right? Like from a risk management mitigation standpoint, what is the best thing to do next? And I would argue that the best thing, the way that people usually come off the best, and this comes from both organizations and on an individual level, is to immediately acknowledge it and be like, yeah, fucked up, sorry. And then like, we'll get back to you. And then, issue whatever apology, et cetera. But you always, always, always look a million times worse, and it spirals out of control, and it gets like a much bigger story, right? It becomes much worse if you deny. It becomes much worse if you try to, put a rug over it. Me spill? No, look, the floor is beautiful. And so I think that this is just being handled completely backwards. And you would think that people who have media training, that's something he does have, would know better, right? Would know that always, always, always backfires. I don't think there's a single case that I can think of when it doesn't backfire, when the person looks better because they initially denied and then they were forced to acknowledge.
So ignoring is often a good strategy, right? There is a Streisand effect thing where like the news cycle moves on quickly.
Oh, sure. That's a different thing.
So a lot of, you'll pay expensive money for a PR person, or you'll have, if you work for a big corporation, their PR team will come in. A lot of times they say, don't say anything. We'll do a little bit of work in the background with reporters who are working on this story, but don't say anything. Go to the woods for a couple of days and then it'll probably go away, right?
Yeah.
This is different. I mean, if you're at the White House, it's a little bit different. This has national security implications. I mean, look, part of the issue is in general, you're a powerful person. You're the vice president or you're the secretary of defense or you're somebody who thinks you're kind of like doing some of the most important work in the world and you're busy and you don't care that much about like security, right? That's someone else's problem. And so it's kind of like the annoying thing that like, I'm worried about this like in a lot of ways. I'm worried about like hacking of AI labs. And
sure.
I'm sure they take it somewhat seriously, but like knowing that personality type, I don't think they probably take it seriously enough. It's seen as like this bureaucratic shit you have to like jump. By the way, I tell you something. If you want to use the men's bathroom at the Pushkin Studios in Flatiron, there's a 4-digit code. I'm telling you, it's not the most difficult code to guess.
Speaking about information security,
that's the easiest.
Well, you'd be, can we just go way back in history? One of my favorite stories, I love the writing of Richard Feynman. I think, he was a brilliant mind, brilliant writer, but he has a hilarious story about information security where he had a complete fascination with safe cracking. Like he would go down these rabbit holes with different things. And at some point he became fascinated with cryptography and safe cracking. And he became very adept at cracking into safes. And mostly how he did it wasn't, he didn't, train with criminals and, figure out like in the movies, how do you listen and all of that. No, he figured out that it was always easy to get the code, right? Because there was always a secretary who like had written it down somewhere or something like that. And then there was actually an incredibly important safe. And there was a series of them that had national security secret stuff because he worked in really important projects, important energy projects, things that were highly classified. And he was like, ooh, I wonder if I can crack into these safes. And he couldn't find anyone writing down the combination. He was striking out. And finally, he was like, you know what? I'm going to try the factory code. And he did. And the safe opened.
Oh, no.
And he was like, huh. So he went to the second one. There was 3 of them. He tried the factory code and the safe opened and the third one as well. So he wrote notes in all 3. And it was like, oh, wow. Yeah, and left them. And then the guy opened them in the wrong order and didn't realize that it was Feynman, making a point and thought that they had been like severely compromised and freaked the fuck out, as he should have. And just this goes to show, right, that people are dumb. And
there are trade-offs, right? If you like need to go withdraw money from your bank and they're like, you face this as a poker player, right? Mm-hmm. They're like, what's it for? It's like, it's my fucking money. You have custody of it, right?
Give it to me.
Yeah.
And these types of things happen all the time. But I think we do need to be worried. Like the bigger implication, I think there are a few big implications here. First, it happened and they're saying, oh, well, it only happened once in 2 months. Okay, first of all, it's never happened before. Like, this is huge. And they're denying it. They're taking it like no big deal. It is a big deal. Like, they were lucky that it was Jeffrey Goldberg and not someone else who was by mistake on this chat. By the way, maybe other people in other chats had other actors on there that were there by mistake. Like, this is a big deal. Information security is incredibly important. Denying is not the correct strategy if you want to mitigate risk. And we should be really, really worried about this. This is not something that is like,
you're not even supposed to have signal on government phones.
No, you're not.
Using private phones, which is kind of what people were mad about with Hillary and like.
Exactly. Everything about this from start to finish is incredibly worrisome. So,
Trump literally. Do you know that if Anthony fucking Weiner hadn't been sexting, right? Like, probably Hillary Clinton becomes president. Maybe Trump becomes president in 2020, to be honest, right? And then what happens in 2020, I don't know, right? But
So many stupid, so much stupidity here and so much male ego, I have to say, that results in things like this. But yes, from a risky business standpoint, this is one bad risky decision after another. Nate, let's take a break and let's talk about some March Madness brackets. Can we start with a spoiler alert? Nate is currently winning our brackets competition.
And worse, Maria and Monty have to root for Duke as their only pathway back to victory pretty much.
And Tennessee.
First of all, it's probably going to put me further ahead, right? But
If Tennessee wins, it doesn't put you further ahead.
They're pretty big underdogs, Maria.
I know,
okay.
But they might win.
Yeah.
And we have Purdue. We have one victory over Nate so far. We had Purdue as a pick, and Nate did not.
Okay. Would I have it at Colorado State? Yeah. Okay. So how is the tournament going? I would say it's a good tournament if you're betting on all the favorites to win, right? You have all the 16 teams left in the men's tournament are from major conferences, right? You have, I think, one double-digit seed. You have all the one seeds intact, all but one of the two seeds intact. So, and I read this article beforehand saying, hey, we have more and more upsets in the NCAA tournament. It's gradual, but it's happening. This year we did not. We had lots of chalk, as we defined the term last week, which means that, the one seeds go forward, the favorites win.
Except there were some upsets in the earlier rounds, right? Which is that
some of them weren't like Colorado State game. They were like the lower seed who'd they beat, but they were actually a favorite in our model, right? There were no, St. John's lost to Arkansas, which was, I believe, a 10 seed, and St. John's kind of was in foul trouble. They benched their best player and kind of otherwise played like crap, right? But Arkansas had won and beaten a pretty good Kansas team, right? It wasn't like and that's the biggest upset of the event so far. But there have been at most 80-20 upsets, none of the 95-5 variety that are quite fun, right? And so how do you evaluate that from a bracket standpoint? On the one hand, if people are going to the Silver Bulletin model and picking the favorites, they're probably pretty happy, right? If you're doing something where you're trying to calibrate relative to the odds of an upset, full disclosure, I do make bets on these games, right? And in general, I was betting more underdogs than favorites.
Why is that, Nate?
So I think our model, thought that there's more parity in college basketball to a degree that maybe other systems aren't accounting for. So this trend toward parity has reversed itself, whether that's a small sample size thing or, there are things that are changing. So in college now, there are NIL deals, which I believe stands for name, image, and likeness.
Yep.
And so now maybe there's more incentive to go to a big program like a Duke or a Kentucky where, but all those big programs already had that advantage, right? But maybe that could be changing things. Maybe Duke is clearly a very strong team. Maybe the one seeds are particularly good this year. Some of the more plucky teams like Gonzaga is a mid-major team that our model thought was super underrated, but they were an 8 seed, which means you faced the 1 seed. I believe it was Houston in the round of 32. And the teams that we thought had good potential to overperform were in disadvantageous positions where they faced other very good teams, right? So that's part of it too. The women's side, this is kind of how it goes, right? There are, in any given year, between 1 to 5 or 6 women's programs that are just so much better than the rest, right? The programs where women's college basketball is treated as co-equal to the men's program, right? That's not everywhere. It might be a dozen to 24 schools in a given year. A few of those are really good, but it's a lot of colleges are not aspiring to treat women's basketball is a revenue sport, as it's called, whereas ones that are can do quite well, right? But there's, gigantic gaps. And if you look at women's college basketball attendance data, gigantic gaps from some teams selling 16,000 seats a game to some literally sell 100 seats a game, right? And so you see that lack of parity play itself out.
Yeah, no, that all makes sense. And in full disclosure, I have not watched any of the women's games. And
You watch the guys?
I've watched some of the guys, yes, because
How
we
much?
had a bracket.
How many hours over under on?
Probably around 2 hours total. Hey, it's 2 hours more than I would normally have watched. I'm baby steps, Nate. Baby steps.
Baby steps.
Baby steps. I'm getting there. I was really rooting for Illinois. I really wanted them to win because they were one of my
that's how it works.
idiosyncratic picks
Have
in
you
my
ever
bracket.
placed a
They
sports bet
lost.
before?
No, I still haven't. I haven't bet any money on this.
Okay.
Yeah. But that was, I wanted to have a free and clear consultation with Monty. I did not want to use any of his, any of his insights to actually make money. Although I think we would have lost money. I don't know. It depends on how the bets went. But no, I've never bet on sports. I actually feel like I don't like. For me, it's not fun. Just like I don't play table games.
But you just said you watched 2 hours more of.
Because
it's
it's fun. But it's a fun bracket, but I don't have money on it. It's just a sweat. It's like it's kind of a pure. I want my team to win.
I'll give you a little free bet sometimes, Maria. Hey, first one's on me.
Gateway drug. But no, I mean, in all honesty, I have zero edge in sports betting. I wouldn't want to engage in an activity that I felt I had no edge. And you have models, like you actually have an edge, right? Like you're one of sports betting is hard.
I did super well.
You're one of the few people who actually has an edge.
I did super well in the NCAA tournament last year, and then this year I'm down a little bit. 2 years before that I was up a little bit. Look, if you go down this year, I've lost more on the women than I've made on the men's, right? But if you go through and say, okay, so far of the bets I've made, I'm down 4%, right? Mm-hmm. ROI. What is the house's cut? 4%, right? So if you have a year where you're winning some and losing some, going 50-50, then that 4% gets drained from your bankroll over and over again. And I do think that probably, I'm going to, but also you run into shit like where I'm restricted to kind of like 2.5 sites, as I complained about last week. Some of them don't take very much money on women's games. I guess it's to my benefit this year since the women's picks haven't been going great. But yeah, they're much more cautious about that.
Yeah, so it's increasingly more difficult to make money, even if you do have an edge.
You have to it's kind of like the one thing about the tournament is like if you were just really dedicated to like college basketball, it's kind of like a short season. But basically first of all, the more serious experiment I did was like trying to seriously bet the NBA for the book 2022-23 season. And this is probably like 2 hours a day of work for 7 months. I mean, that was real effort, right? And that I was basically break even, right?
Yeah.
Which is better than 99% of people. But and that's break even. It's just like, okay, if I want to, and by the way, at the start of that, I have 9 books I can bet on in New York. I'm the end of it, I have 2.5, right? And so first of all, to make money, I'd have to devote more than 2 hours a day, which is, my time's valuable. That's real time,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And then spend even more time figuring out okay, which friends can I find a way to get money down with, or, it's not like these betting sites take appeals necessarily, right? Maybe you can convince them, hey, I'm a fish, so give me back. But so it's quite hard to make a living. You have to be kind of, I don't know. I mean, it's different. You can kind of capitalize it, right? Like you're a smart guy who can get down money and you find people to build a model for you and you can do things like that a little bit. But it's not an easy way it's like poker in that way. It's not an easy way to make a living.
No, absolutely not. Well, I hope that this week, I hope you do well financially and I hope I do well in our bracket bets. So even though I hate saying go Duke, go Duke. Oh, you've put me in this position, Nate.
No.
You have forced me.
Moral hazard.
I know you have forced me in the go Duke and go Tennessee position. Okay. You don't mind the Tennessee.
They got a nice, I like that orange. I like that orange color. What do I sound like?
On that note,
tell me. For our landing pages for the tournament stuff, we have this thing where I have to manually enter the team hex. So I'm very sensitive to which shade of orange Tennessee is versus the burnt orange kind of Texas, by the way. It's I like the orange shade.
Nice. So
little Pantone there.
you have used all your Crayola colors from childhood. You now know what all burnt sienna and all the others. You know exactly what they look like. Yeah. Do you remember those Crayola colors? I have some of those colors just etched into my mind because they were such cool colors. Cerulean was my favorite.
Is that like a blue?
It's a blue, but it just sounds so cool. Cerulean. How cool is that word?
I know. Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
And I'd never heard it before, right? So it really appealed to my writer's sensibility. What was your favorite?
I mean, I like the red orange. So it feels like a Nate color, right?
I think that was burnt sienna, yeah.
Yeah. No, burnt sienna.
That was more brownie.
And I like you buy the advanced set and there's like a separate red orange and orange red.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. This is fun. A lot of kids were shaped by Crayola colors, guys. This will be a future episode. For now, let's talk.
But they had like the white. Didn't they have the white crayon? But the white crayon doesn't really.
It doesn't do much. Yeah, there was a white one.
Hey, Crayola. Some advice. Discontinue the white crayon. It's at best a placebo.
Well, I guess on black paper you can do it on black paper.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah. All right, Crayola, please take our advice into account. Maybe it's better now. Who knows?
Used to have 9 planets. Now there are 8.
A lot of things have changed since we went to school. Let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk more about the women's side of things and that pesky eligibility rule. Last week, Nate, I learned something totally crazy from you. You just casually mentioned that women were not eligible for the WNBA until they were 22 years old. That's just like totally batshit. Let's talk about this a little bit more.
Okay.
This is something that is not true of men. And why in the world does this exist? Why is it a thing?
So let me theorize, right? When Caitlin Clark, and it's probably going to offend people who are sensitive about their women's basketball topics, I will say, right? People who are longtime women's basketball fans. And by the way, we've been running women's models dating back to the 538 days for 10 years now. It's something we've always taken seriously, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to make some broad stroke generalizations, right? Until fairly recently, the WNBA was not a very popular product and not making a lot of money. It did have a loyal fan base, and like the quality of the product is good. Certainly these players are spectacular players, right? But, the reason why all these people were like, Brittany Griner, who was detained in Russia, right? It's because there was more money there than they were making from the American sport, where they might get paid. I mean, it's kind of crazy, right? You talk about some of the best athletes in the world, and they're like getting paid like,
nothing,
some intern salary, basically, right? By the way, most sports leagues have like a rookie scale cap, right? Where like you kind of are restricted in your free agent negotiating power for some number of years. I don't know offhand what it is in the NBA. In baseball, it's 6 years of professional servitude, right? Or service time is how it's used. So there is a lot of like protection. So they're a combination thing. One, there's protection of like the existing classes, right? Mm-hmm. Labor unions in sports tend to bargain in ways that fuck over young players and protect the veterans, which in some ways is like, and I'm, generally, whatever. I think I'm a free country. People should form unions if they want. I think they've benefited people in some cases and maybe not in others, right? I'm just saying empirically in sports, what happens is they tend to protect the veterans, the aging stars, whereas they deny younger players the right to have their full bargaining power, right? Younger players are subject to a draft, and then in most sports, do not make their market salaries or particularly close to it until they're several years in, right? They might say that, we're actually doing a player a service by developing him. It is true that like a young player in the NBA is pretty bad, right? So on the one hand, you have like a restriction of supply problem, which is formulated by unions that maybe don't care as much about these younger players, and also like from the league standpoint, they're probably kind of indifferent toward this, because one thing I've learned having built basketball protection systems, and I haven't done it, well, I've done the team ratings for women, I haven't done player ratings for women, right? In general, if you're a 19-year-old, 20-year-old playing in the NBA, you're pretty bad, right? I imagine the same is true for the WNBA, that generally speaking, from age 18 to 22 is when you do a lot of your physical maturation, when you become an adult in other ways too. Maybe it's a little bit different do women hit puberty earlier than men?
They do.
Maybe it's a little bit different, right?
It is. So everything you're saying, though, should apply to men and women, right? In terms of the unions, protecting older players, all of that.
So one thing, there are probably fewer players who, if you're making whatever, like $60,000 a year in the WNBA, and maybe you run an ad in a local Subway chain or something, right? So on the one hand, like, then maybe the college experience is better if you're playing at like a South Carolina or a UConn or an Iowa or a USC. Maybe the college experience is actually better. It's just probably also like less demand for your services, right? But yeah, I'm surprised there hasn't been more.
Yeah, because that seems like a very paternalistic argument, right? Like, let them have the choice. Like, if the college experience is better, then let them stay in college, but let them also have the same choice as their male counterparts, which is to leave early. Now, one of the things that I heard when I, started researching this a little bit is that, speaking about paternalism, that there was an argument made that, women need the degree more than men do. So force them basically to finish college, because they will thank you for it later, because they'll be lucky that they have an alternate career to fall back on, because this is probably not going to work out. And look, I understand that like technically might be the case, but once again, I think that there should be, you should be able to make that choice. So one of my closest friends was a professional dancer, right? A professional athlete. Didn't go to college, right? Didn't finish college, and danced full time. You know her as well. Ended up, after finishing her dance career, going to Columbia, finishing a degree, writing a novel, becoming an incredibly successful entrepreneur, jewelry designer, all of these wonderful things. But she did that afterwards because she never went to college because she was a professional athlete. So it's not like if you leave at the age of 19 or 20 to go play basketball, oh my God, you can never finish college, right? I think most colleges would be thrilled to have a professional athlete come back to finish their degree, because that's, it's not like you're closing off that option. You're not precluding it. And I think that, so that argument doesn't suffice. And so it does seem like there are these vested interests, as there often are when there's something so crazy, right? When there's something that doesn't make sense, usually it's because there are some old vested interests that don't want it to change. And so what you were saying about unions, about protecting older players, about kind of enshrining that to me kind of makes more sense than, oh, we're doing this for the good of the players, because that seems like a disingenuous argument at best.
No, look, I mean, you have, the other risk is that you get some, if you, talk to college basketball players, men, they'll say, not that I'm talking to them personally, but if you read interviews with them, right, they're like, look, I can't take the chance that I get like injured, right? And therefore have no career at all. USC's best player just tore her ACL in their round of 32 win last night, right? And this is a long recovery, and like if you have that happen after you sign your kind of like rookie contract, then like that gives you more protection, right?
Yeah, so in some ways it's better.
If you can like good enough to play professionally, and the professional league and the NCAA are kind of like, I mean, I guess it's not really the NCAA's fault, right? But the league that's supposed to represent women's basketball is kind of denying you a professional existence. I mean, that's kind of fucked up, right? Somebody should sue. Somebody sue the NBA.
Yeah, somebody should sue.
WNBA, excuse me.
Yeah, no, it is.
It's un-American.
Well, no, it actually is kind of fucked up that you are just unilaterally denied the opportunity to do this, and you should have the choice. You should be able to make a living however you want. And these days, we have so many people arguing that, oh, well, college degrees aren't even what they used to be. You don't even need one. Peter Thiel paying people money not to go to college. And yet here we are, right? That finish your college degree before you can play basketball professionally. I mean, it makes absolutely zero sense.
Yeah, if you're good enough to be, the WNBA, right? One of the 100, 200 best players in the world. And yeah, I mean, that's more valuable than a college degree.
Absolutely it is.
It's more unique and you'll build life skills and
absolutely it is.
Hopefully
and
build a good
and
income.
you can always go back and get a college degree later if you want.
Yeah.
And then you'll be a former WNBA with a college degree, right? Yeah. I think that's the kind of experience that you can't duplicate. Whereas a college degree is actually quite easy to duplicate in a lot of different ways. So yes, I think that you and I agree on this. WNBA, get your shit together. This is not a good rule. All right, well, let's see what happens next week. I don't think the WNBA rules will change, but maybe I will be redeemed in our bracket competition. And if not, Nate, I'm going to have a survey of best burgers in both New York and Vegas, depending on where we are. And then we can pick a fun dinner, whoever wins.
Risky Business is hosted by me, Nate Silver.
And me, Maria Konnikova.
The show is a co-production of Pushkin Industries and iHeartMedia. This episode was produced by Isabel Carter. Our associate producer is Gabriel Hunter Chang. Sally Helm is our editor. Our engineer is Sarah Bruguer. Our executive producer is Jacob Goldstein.
If you want to listen to an ad-free version, sign up for Pushkin Plus. For $6.99 a month, you get access to ad-free listening. Thanks for tuning in.